Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyrighted edition for a video channel. This is Huck TV, the famous, the infamous, the legend in her own mind, Huck L. Berry. And there she is. She was cracking me up. And I'm going to tell you a story that is going to make you laugh, because it made me laugh. So, thanks for being here. So, Huck is, I can't tell you how smart this dog is. I mean, I've had a bunch of German Shepherds before, and they're super smart. But she's like a cut above. She knows that a certain time of the day, I'll come in and get her and say, hey, come on. And she just gets up and comes right into the studio here, and we record. Today, she's out there, and she's kind of laying like this, looking. And I can't tell if she's ready to pounce, play, run, what. I go over there, I go, hey, Huck, come on. And she goes, she just kind of looks at me side-eyed, right? And I said, yeah, come on, let's go. And it's like she just shook her head no. And then I said, okay, so I just started walking. I thought she'd follow me. She didn't. So I went back out there, and I put my hand on her. And she has the ability to jump sideways like no other dog. I mean, it's a Pyrenees thing. They can jump sideways, and she shakes her head at you like she wants to play. And oh, it was hilarious. She wanted to play. And so I played with her a bit, and I said, okay, can we go in now? And she just gets up and prances in here. Oh, man. The dog plays me like you guys would not believe. So, pretty funny. She's a good girl. And today, there's a big park in Columbia Falls. And park goes down near the river. It's really pretty. It's a nice city park. It's huge. And it's probably a couple miles long on the round trip. Go down by the river. It's freezing cold. It was like 25 degrees today. And she loves it. We went out there, walked around. Had a good time. So she's a little tired. But that's my Huck story for today. Now, I want to tell you that I know all of you watch different YouTube channels. I've really never asked which channels you watch because it's none of my business. But I know that many of you watch these channels where these Bigfoot people tell stories. And if you're into that, great. I don't have a problem with that. Now, I had an opportunity to do that because I was getting tons of stories in from my Bigfoot books. Just never wanted to do it. And I have told stories in the past that I deem are credible, but I don't read every one. And if you notice the stories here, I'll only tell the story if I could back it up with some facts. I'm talking about missing people. And if there's other stories that come about from that original story, like if I can go to a UFO website or a Bigfoot website where they have investigators go out and validate the story, then I'll talk about it. But I won't just read a story to read it. And some of you guys got really mad that I read some letters that came in. So I stopped doing that. And just recently, within the last several months, I mean, views on my channel have plummeted. And I put a note up at the beginning of one the other day that I got 50% less views on a video just 2 days apart from another one. That doesn't happen, folks, regularly. It does not happen. This wasn't a holiday. There was nothing. And I saw some comments saying, oh, I think Dave's just playing it off, that YouTube is playing with him. They're not screwing with him. No, they really are. And if you haven't been here for a long time, it's hard to understand. But there was a time that we had huge numbers. And then YouTube started loading the channel up with ads. The other day, 4 people made comments on a video saying there's too many ads, I'm leaving, which is what YouTube wants. Rather than just cutting me off, which would get a big backlash. They're just going to load the channel with ads. And unless you're a paid subscriber of YouTube, you've got to put up with it. Or there's other ways, and you can see in comments on this video, I'm sure some people have put up about how to avoid the ads. So we're just barely hanging on here, folks. Barely hanging on. Barely hanging on YouTube. Any more of a deduction of thousands more, and we're done. Have to be done because it's not worth it. I mean, it takes us hours and hours and hours to put these shows together for you. And since we're original research and you don't hear these stories anyplace else until after I tell them, yeah, a lot of work. So these two cases today, I rarely talk about New Brunswick, but we're going to talk about two cases from New Brunswick. And at the end, we're going to talk about some of these similarities between them. And if you've read my books, and you can go to your local library and ask them to get the books, they can get them transferred from other libraries if they don't have them. You can buy them from me, but do not buy them from Amazon. You'll get ripped off. Yeah, you'll pay $100, $200, $300 for a book that you can get $25 from me. So, but I'd rather you just, if you get them from a library, do it. These two cases are pretty astounding. First case involves a young girl named Alice Oliver, missing July 17th, 1943 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, her family lived in a little tiny community called Harton Settlement, about 4 miles northwest of Canterbury. Parents are Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Oliver. This is a very small rural community located in York County, New Brunswick. The settlement got its originations from an Episcopalian reverend named Thomas Harton Sr., who established the community in 1866 as a farming location, about 20 residents. And at the time, if you cleared a piece of land and you planted a farm and you built a building, you could have the land. And they put up a schoolhouse, 1st through 8th grade. This is within miles of the Maine border. Let me show you this. So this is New Brunswick, border, Maine. Here's Bar Harbor, Maine. If you've never been there, you got to go there. Beautiful, beautiful city and area. This area has a lot of water, very rural, not a lot of settlements in here, nor over here. Harton Settlement, where this happened, again, very rural, very thick, lots of water, lots of swamps. Down here is the Gulf of Maine, right here. Again, this is the far northeast side of Maine. Further up north and further kind of far northern eastern Maine, New Brunswick kind of swings across the top, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, July 17th, 1943, Mrs. Oliver let Alice out to play. Alice was 4 years old. And she was let out to play, and there was a farm right next to theirs. The kids played together. No big deal. They did it every day. This was also berry season there. And the kids like to go and pick berries. It's like a treat. And I know, because they're so sweet and they're so good. So she let her outside to play. And then there's no real explanation for this. But Mrs. Oliver was watching her daughter. Mrs. Oliver went out to pick some berries as well. 4 hours later, Mrs. Oliver comes and starts looking for Alice. And she noticed the kids were in off the field of the farm next door, so she went over there. Kid said, "Oh no, we don't know what happened to Alice. We came in and we didn't know where she went." This was now 5 o'clock. So you have a time span of 4 hours where you really don't know what happened. And Mrs. Oliver said she lost track of time. And so she started looking. She got neighbors to help. They start looking, and there's a meadow where the farm is, pasture, field, and then the woods start. And there's trails that go all through the woods, very thick woods. But Alice knew how to pick berries as well and liked to do that. And Mrs. Oliver thought, well, maybe that's what she was doing. So everyone concentrated on the woods because you could see through the field that she wasn't there. The community looked for the next 3 hours, 2.5 hours, and then Mrs. Oliver contacted the RCMP and requested help. The Mounties arrived in a short time and immediately started searching. And then one of the RCMP started to make the call for more resources the next day because they could quickly see that this was getting out of control. Now, this is, again, put this in your mind. July 17th, 1943, sometime between 1 and 5 p.m. What time is the number one time missing 411 to go missing? 4 p.m. So, RCMP arrive. They're not finding her. They're searching the trails in the dark. They make a call up for the next day. The next day, July 18th, 200 men had been requested from York County to show up at the farm and search under the direction of the RCMP. Good. That's a good start. The next day, July 19th, no clues, no tracks, no evidence, nothing found. Searchers from this county were still searching, trying to find more resources. Very rural area, tough to find. July 20th, the RCMP had made a call to soldiers at their barracks several cities over, and they got their request approved. Canadian soldiers from Fredericton and an Army Reserve unit were deployed to the search. Along with the community members, they had close to 400 to 500 people that were being directed by the RCMP. They decided that they were going to clear all the ponds, creeks. They walked, all the creeks were really shallow, ponds were shallow. And they were getting frustrated. At about this time, July 22nd, they had still 200 searchers on site plus soldiers, and they were searching the same areas multiple times. The theory was that Alice walked out of the area with no foul play. That's what the RCMP said. Well, at this time, too, they got a canine unit from an adjoining city to join the search. And that canine stayed for 3 days. It's a good search. The next day, all men were requested from Carleton and York counties to respond to the farm. And RCMP was going to organize hundreds of people to make an absolute definitive search of the area, cover areas that have been covered 2 to 3 times, cover them again. Alice's mom was interviewed. She said that she thought her daughter was picking berries and just wandered away. The next day, July 24th, 500 men were on the area. Canine handlers said that in his time there, the dog never picked up a scent, no trail, no tracks, no stripped clothing, no shoes. Nothing. July 25th, another huge push. Army units, canine on scene, locals, they gave it everything they got for 12 hours. July 26th through the 30th, for the next 4 days, they had the Army on site, about 200 plus searchers, giving it everything they could. July 30th, Inspector Ballard was the head of the RCMP of this search. He called it off, and then he was interviewed by the press, and he positively, unequivocally stated there's no evidence of foul play. It really bugs the heck out of me when these people say this stuff. Well, if there's no foul play, then are you and your people completely inept? So over the previous 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, you had hundreds of people searching the bush. Where is she? If your people couldn't find her, if a dog couldn't find her, if soldiers couldn't find her, then where is she? I found an article a year later, July 22nd, 1944. This was the last article I could ever find about this, and it was one of those summary articles saying, a year ago, this girl disappeared, blah, blah, blah. They interviewed the RCMP and they stated that the case is open and unsolved. Quote, the case of the disappearance and where she is wrapped in a mystery. No clues were found. Now there's the part that's completely bizarre to me. No clues were found? They didn't find any footprints? No scent trail? No shoes, socks, clothes? No evidence that she was picking berries? Kids never saw her walk away. If I wrote a story, a fictional story like this, nobody would believe it. Now I know some people don't think these cases are even mysterious at all. Oh, these things just happen. No, they don't. There's always evidence somewhere of something. This little girl grew up in this area. She didn't get lost. There was no evidence of any animal predation. So what happened to little Alice? She was never found. And this community of like 20 people, everybody knew each other. If somebody was going to abduct her, the other kids would have seen it. Okay. Let's go to the other case. 24 years later, and 100 miles southeast from Hardin Settlement, there's another little town. I'm sorry, 100 miles northwest of Hardin Settlement is a place called Val Lambert. Hardin Settlement is right here. It's about 6 miles to the border with Maine. Here's Val Lambert. It's 4 to 6 miles from the Maine border, almost equidistance. There's the two locations. They're about 100 miles apart. Just into New Brunswick. Okay? Now, just so you know, I've had people disappear throughout this area of Maine under very, very odd circumstances. So this involves a young boy named Yvon Pelletier. Pelletier, however you want to say it. Oh, Dave, no, you say it like this. I'll get 100 response. Oh, no, Dave, you say it like this. Who cares? 4 years old, missing August 14th, 1967. His home was Val Lambert, New Brunswick, just north of the Maine border. Now, Alice disappeared July 17th, 24 years earlier. I've said this 1,000 times. Let me say it again. If I committed a crime in the same community or nearby within a small period of time, everybody in that community and all law enforcement is going to recognize, maybe we ought to pay attention to this because this and this looks similar. And they happen so close. If I spread them out by decades, nobody remembers, nobody cares. Now, This family had 6 kids. Their oldest son was 8, and Yvon was 4. Oh yeah, same age as Alice. That's remarkable. So, on August 14th at about 6 p.m., the mom makes a call for Yvon for dinner. Residence is located about 18 miles northwest of Edmundston, one of the bigger cities out in that middle of nowhere. He was playing outside. He acknowledged his mom. She came in, started to feed the rest of the kids. He didn't come in. She went back outside. He wasn't there. Now, articles, not me, articles describe him as retarded and could only speak a few words. Now, if you've had kids, especially young boys, when you tell them it's dinner time, they usually come running because they're hungry. Kids don't usually avoid dinner. Fact, especially young boys. So what could have pulled him away? Well, she goes back out, looks around, can't find him. Finally gets the rest of the family together. Gets neighbors together. And for the following 2 hours, they search the area and they can't find him anywhere. So at 8 p.m., at about 7:45, they call the RCMP. 8 o'clock, they arrive. And they immediately start searching, with the Edmundston RCMP leading the search effort. First units on the scene made a request for a canine from Fredericton. They knew that they could use it. Knew that it wouldn't get there that night, but the next morning. Now, this area and the area of Harton Settlement, almost identical as far as topography, size of the city. I mean, I couldn't have picked 2 cities that were so close. Well, the RCMP made these call up. They called up for more people. And August 15th, forestry personnel of the Royal Canadian Government, 10 RCMP Mounties, and a series of other locals and the canine arrived. And the local RCMP decided that they were going to search all the wood lots, fields, barns, water dikes, vacant buildings, ponds, creeks, clear those first. And they did. Now, the next day on the 16th, a large local business called the Fraser Company closed and sent 40 employees to the search scene. And they were told to do everything they can for the RCMP to help find this little boy. Now what you find, and I'm always blown away. You hear about the greed in business these days? Not in these communities. These communities usually only have 1 or 2 big employers. And these employers really take care of the employees and care about them and care about their families to the point that they'll close and on our dollar, you go search for that person. That's a community-based business right there. RCMP sent scuba divers to some of the deeper ponds. 30 students from Lac Unique responded, also searched. And the RCMP made a request from other outlying cities to also help. And this is the second day now that this canine's on site. Canine's name was Warro, W-A-R-R-O. And the next day, the handler of Warro said, been here 3 days, the dog's never picked up a scent. We've never found one. It's unexplainable. The next day, August 18th, heavy thunderstorms rolled into the area, super heavy rains, and they decided to take everybody that was in the fields looking, put them inside the deep, thick woods, and cover that immensely. And that was only a couple hours because that was all that they could do in the storm. But the heavy woods were looked at pretty hard. August 19th. The RCMP determined that they were going to terminate the search effort because of a complete lack of clues. No scent trail and no tracks to follow. Now, what's absolutely bizarre to me is on Oliver's case, that went 13 days. And this was back in 1943. And now we're much more advanced than 67 on searches, and they terminated in 5 days. I think that's weird. Maybe they got frustrated. I'm not sure. But when they terminate the search, almost 5 days later, they give up, RCMP has a press conference. Press asks them, well, is the search over? What's going to happen? RCMP makes this broad stroke statement, same as U.S. searchers. You know, we're not searchers, but police. Oh, we're going to go through the area occasionally. We're going to look. Case isn't closed. We'll be speaking to any hikers that might be in the area, and any hunters that go in there in October, November, we're going to tell them to be looking for them as well. Ha 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 ha. What a joke. 5 days looking for a 4-year-old is not enough. Why do I say that? Well, in August, there's berries, there's food source, there's water everywhere. It's warm, it's muggy. Could a 4-year-old survive 4 days, 5 days in August? Absolutely. Now, a lot of these search and rescue people base their search time on the probability of the victim being alive or not. I'd have to say that a 4-year-old is probably gonna make it 5 days. Now, as I've told you before, there seems to be a proliferation of these victims on the high intellect side and on the DNA compromise side. Now, this boy could only speak a few words per the mom and was retarded. So what is it about those kids that something is interested in? Is it a flaw in the DNA that they're trying to fix? I've heard that a lot. But now let's look at something between these two cases. These cities are cookie cutters of each other. I couldn't believe it. Both small, about 20 residents at the time. Another key point, folks. Mother was in charge of that child when each case happened. I've told you this before, to pay attention to this. It's not that kids don't disappear in the presence of their dad, but it's very rare. And there were no eyes on the child when they disappeared. Both the boy and the girl were 4 years old. A long time ago, I was talking to a DNA expert, and they said between the ages of 2 and 4 is when your DNA is as pure as it can be. I always find that interesting, and I keep that to myself, and I think about it. In both cases, they brought in experienced canines, no scent trail. In both cases, they brought in experienced RCMP officers, no tracks. The timeline, July 17th and August 14th. Those are the 2 dates that this happened, both during berry season. And in one case, the mom actually said she thought Alice may be picking berries, and the mom herself was picking berries when this happened. In both incidents, the boy and the girl disappeared in the afternoon hours. Now, Mrs. Oliver said it was sometime between 1 and 5 p.m. that Alice disappeared. On the Pelletier side, it was sometime between 6 and 6:15 that he disappeared. Optimum time 4. You can see the similarities. 100 miles between these locations, 100 miles in 24 years. and they are almost identical. One boy and one girl. You know, one thing I say in conferences, time and space, it's only relevant to you and me. Animals don't care. Nobody out there in the universe cares, because what's time and space to them? Think about it. So even though it's 24 years in our lifetime, maybe in space-time it's a matter of seconds. And if they can control time and space, what would it matter? I'm just saying, I don't know. If you don't think outside the box, we're never going to get anywhere. But I think you'll find these two cases are just too similar to ignore. I couldn't get a photo on either one, but please share this. I think the data is important. And can you just imagine the hardship that these families felt going back to their rural homes, going back to their community and living for the next 20, 30, 40 years, as long as they lived, coming home every day knowing that somewhere out there in their woods, their child disappeared. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Kindness. I think about kindness every day. I know that there's a fraction of the YouTube world that doesn't believe in that word. There's a lot of mean people out there. But you know what? It's all between just you and me. Because I've been dumping these people left and right that make these rude comments either about you or about me. Costs nothing to be polite and nice. And I greatly appreciate you being here. And Huck's laying on my foot right now, making sure Dad doesn't leave without waking her up. So thanks for being here. I'll give you one more shot of Huck. There she is. She rolled over. Thanks again for being here, folks. Paulides out.